The invitation wasn't necessary. I knew exactly when and where Helena's baby shower would be held. Standing outside the country club's entrance, I smoothed down my black dress, purposefully chosen to stand out among the pastels I knew would fill the room. My name is Zuriel, and today I was crashing my sister's party. Miss, are you at the Howard celebration? The doorman's polite inquiry made me pause. Yes, I replied, the lie sliding easily off my tongue. I'm the sister. His eyes widened slightly. Clearly, he'd been briefed about the guest list. But before he could object, I strode past him with the confidence that had carried me through countless gallery openings in Paris. The sound of feminine laughter guided me to a private room decorated in soft pinks and blues. Through the glass doors, I spotted Helena, her pregnant belly draped in a flowing white dress, surrounded by our mother's country club friends. Mom stood beside her, beaming with the pride she'd never shown for me. I pushed open the door. The laughter died instantly. Zuriel. Helena's voice cracked. What are you doing here? Mom's face hardened. This is a private event. I brought a gift for my future niece or nephew. I held up the carefully wrapped package. Surely you wouldn't turn that away. The room remained silent as I approached Helena. Up close, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. The same look she'd given me 3 years ago when I announced I was moving to Paris to pursue my art career. Thank you, Helena whispered, accepting the package. Her fingers trembled as she unwrapped it, revealing a small original painting I'd created. A whimsical Paris scene perfect for a nursery. It's beautiful, she admitted, and for a moment I saw my little sister again, not the perfect daughter who'd replaced me in our parents' eyes. How's Russell? I asked, noting his absence. Still busy with all those international business trips? Helena's smile faltered. He's in Singapore this week. Very important meetings. Of course. I smiled, thinking of the file hidden in my apartment. The one I'd stumbled upon during my latest exhibition in Paris, containing proof that my brother-in-law's business trips weren't exactly legitimate. Mom stepped between us. Zuriel, this isn't the time or place. Helena needs to rest, not deal with unexpected situations. Unexpected situations? I laughed. Is that what I am now? Not your daughter, just an unexpected situation? Please, Helena pleaded. Don't make a scene. Make a scene? Like when you all made a scene walking out of my first gallery showing? Or when Russell convinced Dad not to invest in my art studio because it wasn't a sound business decision. The other guests shifted uncomfortably. Good. Let them see the cracks in this perfect family facade. That's enough. Mom grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin. You need to leave, now. I yanked free. Don't worry, I'm going. But Helena? I turned to my sister. You might want to ask Russell about his recent trip to Paris, specifically about what he was doing at the Galerie Saint-Germain last month. Helena's face paled. Mom practically shoved me toward the door, but I'd said what I came to say. The seed was planted. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from Giselle. Did you do it? Phase 1 complete. I typed back. They have no idea what's coming. My hands shook as I started my car. The hurt in Helena's eyes haunted me, but I pushed it aside. They'd hurt me worse, year after year, rejection after rejection. Now it was time for truth to shatter their perfect little world. Another text came through, this time from Ty. Got more info on Russell's operations. You need to see this. I smiled, thinking of the evidence mounting in my apartment. Soon, very soon, they'd all know exactly who Russell Howard really was. And maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see who I really am too. As I drove away from the country club, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked exactly like what they thought I was. The black sheep, the troublemaker, the unwanted daughter. But by the time this was over, they'd learned that appearances can be deceiving. Just ask Russell Howard about that. Holy shit, Giselle whispered, spreading the documents across my coffee table. How did you even get these? I took a sip of wine, remembering the moment in Paris when everything changed. Right place, right time. The gallery owner was arguing with Russell in his office. When they stormed out, he left his laptop open. And you just helped yourself to his files? The folder was literally named Shipping Manifests. Who labels their illegal documents that clearly? Giselle picked up a spreadsheet, her eyes widening. These numbers, they're not just shipping art, are they? No. I pulled out my phone, showing her the photos I'd taken. See these paintings? They're forgeries. Really good ones. Russell's been using art galleries as fronts for money laundering. The shipping costs are just cover for moving dirty money across borders. Does Helena have any idea? The question hit me hard. No. She thinks he's this amazing businessman building their perfect life. I grabbed another document. Look at this. He's been siphoning money from Dad's investment too. The studio deal he talked Dad out of? He redirected those funds into his own operation. My phone buzzed. A text from Ty. Meeting set with the gallery owner tomorrow. He's ready to talk. You're really going through with this? Giselle asked, concern etched on her face. Watch this, I said, pulling up Instagram. Helena's latest post showed her cradling her belly, Russell's arm around her shoulders. The caption read, "Counting down the days with my amazing husband. Blessed, yes, perfect life. That's what they all believe in. The perfect life, the perfect marriage, the perfect daughter who made all the right choices." I stood up, pacing. While I'm the failure who chose art over stability, the embarrassment they had to explain away at dinner parties. Zuriel, Giselle started. No, listen. Yesterday at the shower, Mom couldn't even look at me, but she'll look at me now. They all will. My phone rang. Helena's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. What's your actual plan here? Giselle asked, gathering the documents. You can't just dump all this on them at once. They'll never believe it. Already handled. I pulled out 3 envelopes. This one goes to Dad, proof that Russell stole his investment money. This one's for Mom, evidence of Russell's affairs in Paris. And this... I held up the last envelope. Goes to Helena. Photos of Russell with his other family in Singapore. Other family? Giselle gasped. Wife and kid. Helena's not his first perfect life. The voicemail notification pinged. Helena's voice filled the room. Zuri, about what you said at the shower, about Russell in Paris, please call me back. Please. She's scared, Giselle observed. She should be. I sealed the envelopes. The truth is terrifying. Another text from Ty. Gallery owner says Russell threatened him, wants to come clean. What if this destroys them? Giselle asked quietly. Not just Russell, but your whole family? I walked to my window, looking out at the city lights. They destroyed me first. Year after year, event after event, choosing him over me, making me feel worthless because I didn't fit their mold. And this will fix that? No. I turned back to her. But it will force them to see the truth. About Russell, about themselves, about me. My phone buzzed again, a text from Mom. Your sister is upset. Whatever you're doing, stop it. Haven't you caused enough problems? I showed Giselle the message. See? Still blaming me. Still protecting their precious Russell. When are you sending the envelopes? Tomorrow morning. First-class mail, so they'll arrive the next day. I gathered them up, just in time for their Sunday family dinner. The dinner you're never invited to? Exactly. I smiled grimly. But this week I'll be there. They'll need answers only I can give them. Giselle stood, hugging me tight. Just be careful, okay? Revenge has a way of hurting everyone, including the person seeking it. After she left, I sat alone with the envelopes, running my fingers over the sealed edges. 3 years of pain, of rejection, of watching Russell systematically take my place in my own family. All coming down to these 3 envelopes. My phone lit up with one final text from Helena. Whatever you know, Please, I'm pregnant. Don't do anything to hurt my baby. I picked up the envelopes, my hand trembling slightly. I'm not the one who hurt your baby. I whispered to the empty room. Your perfect husband did that all on his own. Tomorrow, the truth would begin to unravel their perfect world, and I would be there to watch it burn. The cafe across from my parents' house gave me a perfect view of the morning's chaos. I watched the mail carrier deliver the envelopes, then waited. Giselle sat beside me, nervously stirring her untouched coffee. How long do you think? She started, but my phone's buzz cut her off. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call. Shouldn't you answer? Giselle asked. Not yet. Wait for it. Dad called next. Then Helena. Their house erupted with activity. Mom pacing by the window, Dad's car screeching out of the driveway. Where's he going? Giselle asked. To his investment advisor, probably. Checking if what I sent him is real. My phone buzzed again. A text from Ty. Russell just called the gallery owner, threatening him. Want me to send the recording? Yes, I typed back. More ammunition. A black SUV pulled up to my parents' house. Russell jumped out, moving with the panicked energy of a man whose world was crumbling. He'd clearly cut his business trip short. Here we go, I murmured. Through the cafe window, I watched Russell burst into the house. Even from across the street, I could hear the shouting. Helena appeared in the doorway, one hand on her belly, the other holding the photos I'd sent. God, she looks devastated, Giselle whispered. She needs to know the truth. My phone rang again. Helena. This time, I answered. How could you? She sobbed. How could you do this to me? How could I? How could he? Did you look at the date stamps on those photos, Helena? His other kid is 3 years old. He was married before he ever met you. You're lying. Russell says they're fake. Check his phone. I cut in. Right now. Check his deleted messages. Silence. Then muffled voices as she presumably confronted him. Zuri. Her voice broke. What do I do? Come to the cafe across the street. Alone. She's actually coming, Giselle said, watching Helena waddle across the street, tears streaming down her face. I stood as she entered, her pregnant belly leading the way. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Sit, I said, pulling out a chair. There's more you need to see. I can't, she started. You can, and you will. I pulled out my tablet, showing her the shipping manifests, the bank transfers, the evidence of Russell's real business. This is who you married, Helena. This is who they chose over me. She scrolled through the documents, her hands shaking. Dad's investment money. All gone, along with the money from 3 other families. Russell's been running this scheme for years. Through the window, we watched Russell storm out of the house, shouting into his phone. Mom followed him, pleading. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Helena asked. Would you have believed me? Over perfect Russell? She flinched. We really did that to you, didn't we? Pushed you away. Chose him. My phone buzzed with Ty's message, the recording of Russell threatening the gallery owner. I played it for Helena. Jesus, she whispered. I don't even recognize his voice. He sounds like a criminal. Because that's what he is. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Did you? Helena looked at me, panic rising. No, but Russell's partners might be cutting their losses. The gallery owner wasn't the only one I contacted. The sirens grew louder. 2 police cars pulled up to our parents' house. Russell saw them and ran, straight toward the cafe. Helena, he shouted, bursting through the door. Don't listen to her. I can explain everything. Explain this, I said, turning my tablet to show a video of him making deals in Paris. Or this? Another swipe revealed photos of money exchanges. You bitch, he snarled, lunging toward me. Giselle stuck out her foot. Russell sprawled face first onto the cafe floor as police officers rushed in. Russell Howard? One officer asked. We have some questions about your art import business. As they led him away in handcuffs, Helena gripped my hand. The baby. We'll have one hell of a story to tell someday, I said. But at least they'll know the truth. Mom appeared in the cafe doorway, mascara streaking her cheeks. What have you done, Zuriel? No, Mom. Helena spoke up, her voice stronger. What have we done? To Zuri? To our family? To ourselves? I watched Mom's face crumple as the truth finally hit her. Outside, Dad's car returned, just in time to see his son-in-law being driven away in a police car. Well, Giselle muttered, guess you're not uninvited from family dinners anymore. But looking at my shattered family, I wondered if there would be any more family dinners to attend. 3 days after Russell's arrest, I sat across from my parents at their dining room table. The same table where they'd once told me I was throwing my life away by pursuing art. Now they were the ones looking lost. The bank called again, Dad said, his voice hollow. Almost everything's gone. Mom's hand trembled as she poured more wine. How did we not see it? Because you didn't want to see it, I replied. Russell showed you what you wanted. Success, stability, status. Everything you thought I couldn't give you. That's not fair, Mom snapped, but Dad raised his hand. No, Vera, let her speak. We owe her that much. I pulled out my phone, showing them more documents. Russell didn't just steal your money, Dad. He used your reputation to lure in other investors. Your friends at the country club? Check their accounts. Dad's face went ashen. The Thompsons' retirement fund? Gone, along with the Williams' college savings for their kids. Stop it, Mom pleaded. Just stop. Why? Because it hurts? Because it ruins your perfect image of him? Because your sister is upstairs crying herself sick, Mom shot back. Because everything we believed in is falling apart. Now you know how I felt. I stood up, pacing. Every time you chose him over me. Every time you praised his real job while dismissing my art. Every time you made me feel worthless because I didn't fit your plan. The stairs creaked. Helena appeared, looking exhausted. I heard shouting. You should be resting, Mom started, but Helena waved her off. I've done enough resting. She sat down heavily. I want to know everything, Zuri. No more secrets. I pulled out my tablet, but Dad stopped me. First, I need to know something. How did you find all this out? Remember that gallery showing in Paris? The one none of you attended? The flinches around the table were satisfying. Russell was there, making one of his deals. He got sloppy, left evidence. Once I started digging. Why didn't you go to the police first? Mom demanded. Would you have believed them over Russell? Or would you have blamed me for trying to ruin Helena's perfect life? The silence was answer enough. My phone buzzed. Tie again. More victims coming forward. Russell's operation bigger than we thought. You might want to warn your family. There's more, isn't there? Helena asked, reading my expression. Russell's other wife came forward. In Singapore. She's working with the authorities. Mom's wine glass slipped, shattering on the floor. No one moved to clean it up. I trusted him, Dad whispered. With my money, my reputation, my daughter. We all did, Helena said. Because he was everything you wanted in a son-in-law. Unlike what? I pressed. Unlike the life you chose, she finished. The life we rejected. Mom started crying. Not her usual controlled tears, but deep, ugly sobs. I was so afraid, she choked out. After your father's brother lost everything pursuing his dreams. I couldn't bear to see you struggle like that. So you pushed me away instead? We pushed you toward safety, Dad said. Or what we thought was safety. Look how well that turned out. Helena reached for my hand across the table. Show me the rest, Zuri. Show us everything. For the next hour, I laid it all out. The forged artwork, the money laundering, the multiple families, the threatened gallery owners. With each revelation, my family's perfect world crumbled further. The police want to talk to all of you, I said finally. About the investments, the companies Russell set up in your names. Our names? Dad looked up sharply. He used your identities to create shell corporations. That's why I had to do this my way. If I'd gone to the police first, you might have been implicated. You were protecting us, Helena realized. Even after everything. You're my family. The words caught in my throat. Even when you didn't want me, you were still my family. Mom stood up suddenly, her chair scraping back. For a moment, I thought she was going to walk away again. Instead, she wrapped her arms around me, holding me like she hadn't since I was small. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. One by one, they joined the embrace. Dad, then Helena, her belly pressing against my back. We stood there, a broken family trying to find its way back together. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, but I ignored it. The truth could wait a moment longer. Right now, in this shattered dining room with its broken wine glass and broken dreams, something else was finally breaking too. The walls we'd built between us. The police station's fluorescent lights made everyone look sickly. Helena sat beside me, hands protectively over her belly, while Mom and Dad spoke with detectives in separate rooms. Mrs. Howard? A detective approached Helena. We need your statement now. I'll come with you, I offered, but Helena shook her head. I need to do this alone, Zuri. I need to face it. As she waddled away, Giselle arrived with coffee. How's it going? They've been questioning Dad for 2 hours. Mom's barely holding it together. My phone lit up with a message from Russell's lawyer. My client requests a meeting with you. Alone. No way in hell, Giselle said, reading over my shoulder. Actually, I stood up. This might be exactly what we need. Zuri, don't... But I was already walking to the detective's desk. 20 minutes later, I sat across from Russell in an interview room, a recording device between us. You look terrible, I observed. The designer suits were gone, replaced by orange prison wear. You've ruined everything, he snarled. My business, my reputation. Your multiple families? I cut in. How's the son in Singapore, by the way? His fist slammed the table. You think you're so clever, but you've destroyed your sister's life. That baby will grow up without a father. Better than growing up with a criminal for a father. I can still fix this. He leaned forward. I have offshore accounts. Money your father will never see again unless you help me. I smiled, tapping the recorder. There it is, the threat I was waiting for. His face darkened. You recorded... The door burst open. 2 detectives entered, followed by my father. That's enough, Dad said. We got what we needed. Russell lunged across the table, but the detectives were faster. As they dragged him away, he shouted, Your precious artist daughter isn't so innocent. Ask her how she really got those files. Dad turned to me. Is there something I should know? I might have borrowed some files from his laptop. In Paris. Illegally? Let's say I made an unauthorized backup of data he left unsecured in a public space. Dad's laugh surprised me. The first real laugh I'd heard from him in years. You always were too smart for your own good. Back in the waiting area, Helena was finishing her statement. Mom sat nearby, looking through her phone. What are you doing? I asked her. Looking at your art website. I never actually looked at it before. She turned the screen toward me. These prices, Zuri. People pay this much for your work? More, usually. That's just the gallery price. More than Russell made in his legitimate deals, Dad muttered. Helena joined us, exhausted but somehow lighter. They're charging him with fraud, money laundering, and identity theft, among other things. The Singapore authorities want to extradite him too, I added. Good, Helena said firmly. Let them have him. Mom stood suddenly. I need to show you all something. She led us to her car, drove to their house, and went straight to the study. From a hidden safe, she pulled out a folder. Your first gallery submission, she said, handing it to me. The one we rejected. I kept it. Inside were photos of my early work, along with glowing reviews from art critics. You kept this? My hands shook. But you said my art was worthless. Because I was scared, Mom whispered. Scared you'd struggle, scared you'd fail. Instead, you succeeded brilliantly, and we failed you. Helena picked up one of the photos. I remember this piece. You painted it the summer before college. Before you all decided my future wasn't worth investing in, I said. We were wrong, Dad said simply. About everything. My phone buzzed. Ty again. Gallery owner wants to feature your new series. Theme, family secrets. You in? I looked at my family, Mom clutching my old portfolio, Dad looking at my current prices with newfound respect, Helena studying my early work with genuine interest. I have a proposition, I said. The gallery wants to feature my new work, but I'm thinking maybe we could use it to help make things right. What do you mean? Dad asked. We sell the pieces, use the money to help repay the families Russell stole from. You'd do that? Mom's eyes welled up. That's what family does, right? Helps fix each other's mistakes? Helena hugged me, her belly pressing between us. Speaking of family, I've been thinking about names for the baby. Please tell me you're not sticking with Russell Jr. I groaned. She laughed. Actually laughed. I was thinking, how do you feel about being a namesake? Mom gasped. Dad grinned. And I finally felt like I was home. Just promise me one thing, I said. If the kid wants to be an artist, we'll be their biggest supporters, they all said together. And for once, I believed them. Are you sure about this? Giselle asked, helping me hang the last painting, a dark, swirling piece titled Family Lies. The gallery buzzed with pre-opening activity. In 2 hours, it would be filled with art critics, potential buyers, and most nervously, the families Russell had defrauded. They deserve to see it, I said, adjusting the lighting. All of it. My phone buzzed. Helena. Water broke. At hospital. Don't worry about coming. Focus on gallery. Yeah, right, I snorted, already grabbing my coat. Giselle, you're in charge. Don't let anyone touch anything until I'm back. The hospital was chaos. Mom pacing the waiting room, Dad stress-eating vending machine snacks, Helena's screams echoing down the hall. Perfect timing, the nurse said as I rushed in. She's been asking for you. Helena gripped my hand so hard I thought it would break. I can't do this, she gasped. Yes, you can. You're stronger than you think. You survived Russell. You can survive this. The gallery opening can wait. Some things are more important. Hours passed. Mom and Dad took turns pacing. I didn't leave Helena's side, not even when she threatened to murder me for suggesting she breathed through the pain. Push, the doctor ordered. One more big push, Helena screamed. I thought my hand would shatter. And then, a new cry filled the room. It's a girl, the doctor announced. Zuriel, Helena whispered, exhausted but smiling. Her name is Zuriel. Mom burst into tears. Dad hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. And little Zuriel, red-faced and angry at the world, screamed her arrival. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Giselle. Gallery packed. Everyone's waiting. The Thompson family is here. Go, Helena insisted. Go make things right. I kissed her forehead, then my namesake's, and rushed back to the gallery. The space was packed, every painting surrounded by viewers. The Thompson family stood before The Price of Trust, a piece showing hands reaching for money that turned to ash. Mr. Thompson's shoulders shook. Mr. Thompson? I approached carefully. I'm Zuriel. The artist? He turned, eyes red. These paintings, they tell our story. They tell all our stories, Mrs. Thompson added. Everyone Russell hurt. I led them to a private room where Ty waited with documents. The painting's already sold, I told them, along with 3 others. The money, it's not everything Russell took, but You're trying to make it right, Mr. Thompson said, even though it wasn't your debt to pay. Family debts are shared debts, I replied, even when the family member turns out to be a criminal. The Williams family was next, then the Patels. One by one, I showed them the paintings inspired by their stories and the checks that would help rebuild their lives. Your father raised a good daughter, Mr. Williams said. The right daughter. My phone buzzed with a photo. Tiny Zuriel, swaddled in hospital blankets. I showed it to the families. Russell's daughter? Mrs. Patel asked. No, I smiled. My niece, born tonight, named after me. A new beginning. The gallery doors burst open. 2 police officers entered, followed by Russell's lawyer. Miss, the lawyer approached. My client has information about additional accounts. He's willing to reveal their locations in exchange for no deals. I cut him off. The paintings tell the truth. Let him sit with that. After the lawyer left, Giselle rushed over. Every painting sold. Over asking price. The critics are calling it a raw exploration of family betrayal and redemption. My phone buzzed again. Dad. Helena's asking for you, and your mom won't stop crying about the baby's name. Go, Giselle insisted. I'll handle the rest here. Back at the hospital, I found my family crowded into Helena's room. Mom cradling baby Zuriel, Dad taking photos, Helena beaming despite her exhaustion. How much? Helena asked. Enough to repay almost everyone, I said. The paintings, they understood. They all understood. Of course they did, Mom said, rocking the baby. You showed them the truth, like you showed us. Through art, Dad added. The career we thought wouldn't amount to anything. Baby Zuriel started fussing. Mom handed her to me, and as I held my niece for the first time, Helena spoke. She'll grow up knowing the truth, she said. About everything. About art, about family, about forgiveness. About her crazy aunt who brought down an international criminal through paintings? I teased. About her aunt who saved us all. Helena corrected. The baby gripped my finger, strong and sure, like she already knew her place in this complicated family story. My phone buzzed one last time. A news alert. Russell pleads guilty to all charges. Good, Helena said firmly. Now we can focus on what matters. Looking at my family, whole and healing, I couldn't agree more. 6 months after Russell's guilty plea, I stood in my parents' backyard, watching Mom chase little Zuriel around with a tiny paintbrush. The baby's giggles filled the air as colorful splotches decorated her smock. She's a natural, Helena said, joining me on the patio, already following in her aunt's footsteps. My phone buzzed, another message from Russell's lawyer. I deleted it without reading. Still trying to make deals? Helena asked. Every week. But his other wife in Singapore isn't being as forgiving as his lawyers hoped. Dad emerged from his study, waving papers. Just got off the phone with the bankruptcy trustee. They found another account. How much? Helena asked. Enough to fully repay the Williams family. He grinned. Their daughter can go to college after all. The doorbell rang. Mom scooped up baby Zuriel, paint and all, as Giselle and Ty arrived with boxes. The last of the gallery sales, Ty announced. Plus 3 commissions from people who saw the Family Secrets series. Speaking of secrets, Giselle added, guess who's getting married next month? The gallery owner? I laughed. To Russell's ex from Singapore? Poetic justice, Helena mused. She gets the honest man, while Russell gets 20 years in prison. Mom set baby Zuriel in her playpen and started opening boxes. These new paintings, Zuri, they're different. She was right. Gone were the dark themes of betrayal. The new pieces exploded with color and hope, a series I called Redemption. The critics are calling it your best work yet, Ty said. They say they can feel the healing in every brushstroke. Because there is healing, I replied, watching Mom make faces at the baby. In all of us. The back gate opened. 2 women entered, Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Williams carrying casseroles. Hope we're not interrupting, Mrs. Thompson said. We brought dinner. And wine, Mrs. Williams added. Lots of wine. What started as a support group for Russell's victims had evolved into genuine friendship. Every week they gathered here, sharing meals, sharing stories, sharing recovery. Did you tell them? Mrs. Thompson asked Dad. Just did. About the new account. Mrs. Williams burst into tears. My daughter. She can keep her scholarship. Helena hugged her. Your daughter is going to do amazing things, just like someone else I know who followed her dreams despite everything. She looked pointedly at me and I felt my cheeks flush. Speaking of dreams, Mom called from the playpen. Look what your niece made. Baby Zuriel had managed to create a surprisingly coherent pattern with her finger paints. Everyone crowded around, oohing and eyeing. Another artist in the family. Dad said proudly. This one will support from the start. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Russell's other wife. The divorce is final. Thank you for everything. Your family is lucky to have you. You know what's funny? Helena said, reading over my shoulder. If Russell hadn't been so terrible, we might never have found our way back to each other. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best endings, Mrs. Thompson observed. Giselle started setting up dinner on the patio table. The evening sun cast long shadows across the yard as everyone took their places. Not just family, but this extended circle of healing we'd created. Before we eat, Dad stood up, raising his glass. To second chances. To truth. To art. To family, Mom added. All kinds of family. Baby Zuriel chose that moment to fling a glob of paint, hitting Dad square in the face. The table erupted in laughter. That's definitely your niece. Helena nudged me. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone to show them an email. About that, the Paris Gallery wants to feature a mother-daughter artist series. They suggested we start Baby Zuriel early. Mom dropped her fork. Paris? But that means we'd all have to go, I finished. Together this time. As a family, Dad added. Helena wiped paint off the baby's hands. What do you say, little one? Ready to show Paris what the next generation of artists can do? Baby Zuriel responded by painting a perfect handprint on Helena's shirt. I'd say that's a yes. Mrs. Williams laughed. As dinner continued, I watched my family. Mom teaching Baby Zuriel to hold a proper brush, Dad discussing art investments with Ty. Helena sharing recovery stories with Russell's other victims turned friends. My phone buzzed one last time. A notification that Russell's final appeal had been denied. I deleted it without sharing. Some chapters needed to stay closed. More wine? Giselle offered. Please, I said, raising my glass to the sunset. Here's to painting new stories. Everyone clinked glasses, and Baby Zuriel squealed in delight, as if she too knew. The best masterpieces come from the heart. The Parisian gallery buzzed with excitement as Baby Zuriel smacked her hands against a canvas, creating explosive bursts of color. Helena stood nearby, beaming as photographers captured the moment. She's a natural, the gallery owner said in accented English, just like her aunt. My latest collection hung on the walls, Legacy of Truth. Each piece telling our family's journey from betrayal to redemption. But the centerpiece was different. A collaborative work between me, Helena, Mom, and Baby Zuriel. The critics are calling it revolutionary, Ty said, showing me the early reviews on his tablet. A family healing through art. Mom appeared with more paint for the baby. Gone was her country club perfectionism, replaced by an artist's smock splattered with colors. Your father's still on the phone with the lawyers? She said. The last of Russell's accounts have been found. Everyone will be made whole. Speaking of whole, Giselle nudged me, pointing to the gallery entrance. Russell's other wife stood there, holding her son's hand. She'd flown in from Singapore for the showing, part of her own healing journey. Come. I waved them over. Baby Zuriel needs more painting partners. The two children, half-siblings unknown to each other just months ago, instantly began creating together, their laughter transcending language barriers. "This is better than revenge," Russell's ex-wife said softly. "This is justice." Dad finally joined us, tucking his phone away. "It's done," he announced. "The last settlement has been paid. Russell's empire is officially dismantled. And rebuilt into something beautiful," Helena added, watching the children paint. The gallery doors opened again. Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Williams, and other families Russell had hurt filed in, having flown to Paris for the showing. They carried gifts, not just for baby Zuriel, but for her brother too. "We're all connected now," Mrs. Williams said. "Through pain, through healing, through art." My phone buzzed, a prison notification. Russell had been transferred to Singapore to face charges there. I deleted it without comment. His chapter in our story was over. "Ladies and gentlemen," the gallery owner called out, "the collaborative piece is complete." Everyone gathered around the massive canvas. Baby Zuriel's chaotic joy, Helena's tentative hope, Mom's emerging creativity, and my guiding artistry, all merged into something unprecedented. "What's it called?" someone asked. I looked at my family, all of them, blood and chosen alike, and smiled. "Second chances. Perfect," Helena whispered, hugging me. "Just like that day you crashed my baby shower." I was so angry then, I admitted, so focused on revenge. "And now?" Mom asked. Paint streaked across her cheek. "Now I understand. Sometimes you have to break something to rebuild it stronger." Baby Zuriel chose that moment to toddle over, covered head to toe in paint. Her brother followed, equally messy. They raised their tiny hands toward the canvas. "One last touch?" Helena suggested. Together, the children pressed their handprints onto the corner of the piece, a signature of the next generation. "You know," Dad said, "I always worried about leaving a legacy. Turns out it wasn't about money or status at all." "It's about truth," Russell's ex-wife added. "And family," Mrs. Thompson said. "And art," Mom finished, surprising us all. The gallery erupted in applause as the piece was officially unveiled. Critics rushed forward, cameras flashed, but I stepped back, watching my family interact with natural ease. Helena teaching her daughter to mix colors, Mom discussing technique with aspiring artists, Dad proudly explaining the investment potential of art to anyone who'd listen, the two children creating without care for the past's complications. "You did it," Giselle said, joining me. "You got everything you wanted." "No," I corrected her. "I got something better. I got what we all needed." My phone buzzed one final time, a message from the Singapore authorities. Russell had confessed to everything, finally taking responsibility. "Should we tell them?" Ty asked, seeing the message. I watched baby Zuriel laugh as she created another masterpiece, her brother adding his own flourishes, their mothers chatting like old friends. "No," I decided. "Let's focus on this masterpiece instead." The Paris sunset streamed through the gallery windows, catching the fresh paint on the collaborative piece. In the golden light, all our broken pieces, family, trust, love, art, had transformed into something whole. "More paint," baby Zuriel demanded, her first complete sentence. Everyone laughed, and I grabbed a fresh palette. Some stories end with revenge, others with justice. But ours? Ours ended with creation, with family, with truth. And really, that was the most beautiful masterpiece of all.
My life feels like a broken kaleidoscope. At the age of 28, I find myself questioning everything I once believed about the bonds of family. My name is Emma Johnson. Until yesterday, I was leading a simple yet peaceful life. However, that peace shattered into pieces when my stepsister, Becky, stormed into our home. To understand this incident, we need to go back 20 years. When I was 8, our happy family life fell apart. The morning began with my mother's usual smile. She sent my father and me off with a cheerful, "Have a good day." I left the house saying, "See you later." But that turned out to be the last exchange I would have with my mother. Who could have imagined that the mother who waved goodbye that morning would never come back? She was involved in a traffic accident while on her way to the store. When I received the news, I was standing in front of my teacher's desk. The moment I saw my aunt breaking down in the staff room, I realized that something irreversible had happened. In the years that followed, the life my father and I led felt like walking through fog. My father threw himself into his work to distract from his grief, and my care was mostly left to my nanny and relatives. My father often came home after I had gone to sleep. I remember seeing him late at night. The image of him standing alone at the kitchen table with an empty whiskey glass is still vivid in my memory. During that time, my daily routine was going back and forth between school and the library. I immersed myself in the world of books to escape the loneliness of reality. One of my favorites was Anne of Green Gables. I saw myself in the story of the orphan Anne finding happiness with a new family. In the spring, when I turned 10, my father made a shocking announcement. He had decided to remarry. His partner was Patty Hill. She was a cheerful woman who worked at the cosmetics counter in a department store. On the day we first met, Patty greeted me with a kind smile. She brought me a deluxe edition of A Little Princess, my favorite book. I genuinely believed that she would make a wonderful mother. Patty was always considerate. She gave me books I liked and cute hair accessories, and she never missed a school event. However, this happy time did not last long. After the wedding, Patty's child, Becky, joined our household. Becky was in the same grade as me. Since her birthday came later in the year, she became my younger stepsister. From that moment, my life changed significantly. Becky was like the sun. Bright, active, and full of confidence, she naturally drew people to her. She was the complete opposite of me, an introverted bookworm. Initially, I was excited about having a sister. Having grown up an only child, the prospect of sharing secrets and staying up late talking seemed like a dream. I believed we could become best friends, like Diana and Anne in Anne of Green Gables. But that dream quickly crumbled. Soon after moving in, Becky made her first move. She claimed she needed a larger bedroom because she was anxious about the new environment. My room had the best view of the garden and had been my cherished space since childhood. I protested to my father, but his response was unexpected. "Can you consider Becky's request? It might help her adjust to the new environment." This was the first instance where my father prioritized Becky's needs over mine. But it certainly wasn't the last. As time passed, Becky's true nature gradually became clear. My belongings would accidentally break, or my clothes and books would be borrowed without permission. One incident I can't forget is when the silver locket necklace, the last birthday present from my mother, disappeared. Days later, I found one of Becky's friends wearing it. I appealed to my parents, but Becky skillfully played the victim. "I thought Emma had given it to me," she explained tearfully. Her clever excuse was that I was jealous and trying to disrupt the harmony of our new family. My father was distraught, wondering why we couldn't get along. Becky's influence even extended to our school life. Her popularity became a sinister force that continued to torment me. While she invited the entire grade to her birthday parties, I was the only one excluded. "It must have been an oversight," Patty said, but it was clear that it was intentional. At that time, neither my father nor Patty said anything to comfort me. When I was 13, I joined the school choir. Singing was one of my few escapes. I stayed after school every day to practice, and I was finally given a solo part in the spring concert. But my joy was short-lived. Becky suddenly showed interest in the choir as well. She had a natural talent. With her clear, beautiful voice, she quickly gained the teacher's trust. The solo part one had been practicing for weeks was swiftly given to her. "Becky is more suited for it," the teacher said. I was pushed to the back row, forced to sing in Becky's shadow. Even during practice at home, Becky would mock my singing and make exaggerated imitations, making everyone laugh. My father laughed and said, "Well, if Becky is more suited for it, then it can't be helped." I remember my heart freezing at those words, but I practiced every day. As I started to say this with a trembling voice, Patty suddenly became stern. "Emma, can't you just admit it? It's natural that there are differences in talent. Becky was born with a musical gift. But stop dragging others down. It's Becky's chance to shine. As her older sister, you should be supporting her." My father nodded in agreement. "That's right. Be thankful that Becky is singing instead." That night, I quietly cried in my room. From the hallway, I could hear Becky and Patty happily practicing singing together. Sometimes they would laugh together, including imitations of me. The next day, the practice at home increased. Every time Becky sang in the living room, Patty would praise her with a beaming smile. "That's wonderful." Whenever I was nearby, Becky would always insert an imitation of my singing. We have to make sure not to end up like Emma. Each time, my parents just watched with a pleased look. Sometimes, my father would even say, "Emma should take a lesson." My existence was merely a shadow to highlight Becky. This wasn't limited to singing, it extended to my school life and my position at home. From then on, I gradually began to retreat into my shell. At school, I became a shadow-like presence, spending most of my breaks in the library. It was the only place safe from Becky's influence. When I was 15, I made a critical mistake. I confided a secret to Becky. It was about my feelings for a classmate, Alex Ford. Alex was funny and kind, and even under Becky's influence, he was one of the few who talked to me normally. We were together in the library committee, and I gradually developed feelings for him. One night, unusually, Becky spoke to me kindly. Desperate for a sisterly conversation, I let my guard down. "I like Alex." I confided my long-held feelings to my stepsister, who had approached me with unusual kindness. "Don't worry, I'll support you." I still vividly remember how Becky's eyes mischievously sparkled when she said that to me. I had no idea that this confession would lead to the most humiliating experience of my life. The next morning, Becky told me, "Alex said he wants to talk to you and instructed me to wait for him in the cafeteria." I prepared more carefully than usual that day. I brushed my hair repeatedly and neatly arranged the pleats of my uniform skirt. As lunchtime approached, my heartbeat accelerated. The mixture of anticipation and nervousness as Alex approached in the crowded cafeteria. Instead of spending my usual lunch break in the library, I ventured into the unusually busy cafeteria, already feeling the stares. Normally, my classmates wouldn't bother with someone like me, but now they looked on as if expecting something. "Oh, Emma!" I heard a familiar voice and turned around to see Alex. His usual kind smile was there, but something felt off. Behind him were Becky and her entourage. "Everyone, listen." Alex's voice echoed through the cafeteria. My heart pounded violently. It seems there's a rumor that Emma and I like each other. At that moment, it felt as if time had stopped. This is all Becky's prank. "I don't see you that way. I'm sorry." His voice was kind, but his words cut through my heart like a knife. Laughter erupted around us. "I thought so," someone said, and another whispered, "It's the library committee's loner." Becky looked apologetic, but her eyes were laughing. Even now, the laughter from that moment sometimes haunts my nightmares. I wanted to run away, but my body wouldn't move. Eventually, someone said, "Poor thing," and that was the trigger that finally got me moving. I don't remember running to the library. When I realized it, I was trembling in the back seat, trying to escape into Anne of Green Gables as usual, but I couldn't read through the tears. After school, I was called to the staff room. "Why did you skip class?" my teacher asked, but I couldn't answer. However, it was even harder when I tried to talk to my parents at home. Becky had already made her move. With exaggerated tears, she explained, "I just wanted to create a chance for her to talk to the guy she likes." She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, and that I was distorting the facts to ruin her reputation. "It was all with good intentions," Patty said, rubbing Becky's back as she spoke. My father agreed. "If you were more proactive like Becky, these misunderstandings wouldn't happen." Their words felt like physical violence, wounding me. High school life was filled with further pain. Despite getting caught drinking at a party, Becky got her driver's license before me and was allowed to use the family car freely. When I wanted to borrow the car for a school project, I was told I wasn't responsible enough. When Becky's grades dropped, it was excused because she was busy with clubs and social life. But when my grades fell, I was scolded for not trying hard enough. Even our achievements were treated differently. When Becky became a cheerleader, they threw a celebration party with our relatives. When I won a county essay contest, all I got was a light pat on the back and a "well done." At 18, I used college as an escape, going as far away as possible to a school in Los Angeles from New York. The move meant more than just physical distance, it was the first step towards mental independence. College life marked a new beginning. Freed from Becky's influence, I slowly began to reclaim myself. I studied diligently in the literature department and lived independently while working part-time. However, it wasn't a complete liberation. I kept family interactions to a minimum, but Becky still took every opportunity to throw subtle digs about my appearance and college life. A turning point came during my senior year. Struggling with job hunting and feeling uncertain about the future, I attended a special lecture in the literature department, Family Images in Modern Literature. The lecturer that day was the up-and-coming author David Owen. I deeply resonated with his works depicting complex family relationships. After the lecture, we met by chance in the library and passionately discussed literature. He listened sincerely to my opinions and engaged me in equal debate, sometimes with sharp counter-arguments. It was the first time someone had truly heard the voice I'd suppressed for years. It was also a time filled with intellectual stimulation. This encounter led to David inviting me to his research lab. Initially, our discussions focused on literature, but gradually personal topics increased. One rainy evening, I shared my family story for the first time. The psychological abuse from my stepmother and stepsister, my father's indifference. After I finished, David broke a long silence and said, "That's abuse, Emma." His words unlocked something inside me. He continued, "Why don't you try writing a novel about your experiences someday?" His suggestion held more than just creative advice. He recognized a talent within me that I hadn't seen. After graduating, I landed a job at a local publishing house. Working in the proofreading department was modest but provided valuable insight into the bookmaking process. David and I started meeting on weekends. Under his guidance, I began writing a novel alongside my job. My early writing was clumsy, but he patiently edited my work. "You have talent. I believe it's my role to nurture it." His words warmed my heart. Gradually, David and I grew closer, and eventually we began dating. About 6 months into our relationship, a significant turning point occurred. David's new book, Afternoon of Reminiscence, was finally selected for a prize. From there, my life changed dramatically. As the girlfriend of a famous author, I even started appearing in weekly magazines. There were also spiteful calls from Becky. "Isn't this just a publicity stunt?" At one point, I considered giving up on my relationship with David. However, David protected me more than ever before. "You are the source of my creativity. I never want to let you go." The proposal came in an unexpected way. It happened on the day my debut novel, Memories Within, won a Newcomers Award in a literary magazine. After the award ceremony, David took me to his research lab. There, I found a notebook he had kept since the day we met, in which he had written down our conversations. "From the moment I met you, I knew I wanted to weave stories with you." He had prepared a surprise ring. It resembled the pearl ring from my favorite novel, Anne of Green Gables. Will you join me not just as fellow writers, but as partners in life? I nodded, tears streaming down my face. As expected, my father and Patty's reaction to our marriage announcement was predictable. Can you really lead a stable life with a writer? Isn't there someone better out there? Meanwhile, Becky openly scowled. I can't believe you got married before me. But I was no longer the old me. Through my life with David, I had learned my own worth and gained the strength to assert my opinions. I decide my own life. Our wedding was small but heartwarming. David's parents welcomed me as if I were their own daughter. During our vows, David said, "We understand and accept each other's stories and create new ones together. That's what our marriage means to us." After getting married, we bought a house in the suburbs of New York. David gave me a present. It was a high-performance security camera system. For your protection, and for the family we're going to build together. I felt a profound love in his precaution. I resigned from the publishing house and began my path as a full-time writer. David remained my first reader and my most critical critic. Although we occasionally clashed in opinions, we accepted it as part of the creative process. Your words have a special power. It's my job to bring that out to its fullest. We spent our days side by side at our desks, reading each other's manuscripts and discussing late into the night. These days were our happiness. I, who had suffered from a distorted family, had found a new kind of family. One where we elevated and supported each other. Our story was sure to be beautiful. I was certain of this until that day came. The day Becky came to destroy our peaceful life. I was in my home office, working on a new novel concept. David was out at a meeting with his publisher, and I was alone at home. When the doorbell rang, I instinctively felt something bad was about to happen. The monitor showed Becky, disheveled and dirty, a far cry from her usual self, holding a suitcase. "Open up, I need to talk to you." Her voice was tired and slightly hoarse. When I didn't respond, she suddenly began kicking the potted plants at the entrance. I deserved to be happy too. Startled by the noise, I went to check and saw her trying to break the lock with some tool. Just as I was about to call the police, I heard the door open. She had used a spare key to enter, an oversight from when I hadn't reclaimed the key previously entrusted to Patty. "Why did you get married before me? Why do you get to be happy? I've been fired from my job, kicked out by my boyfriend. I've lost everything." Becky stormed into the living room, screaming. I could see a few days' worth of clothes packed in her suitcase. She smashed the vases and threw books from the shelves onto the floor. I watched in dismay as my manuscripts and David's documents scattered. "I'll destroy everything. Your happy life is a sham. I don't even have a place to return to." Then she noticed my wedding album. The moment she started tearing the pages, something in me snapped. "Stop!" As I tried to stop her desperately, Becky pushed me. I hit my head against the wall, nearly losing consciousness. Then I heard the front door open. "Emma!" It was David's voice. He had returned early from his meeting, quickly grasped the situation, and restrained Becky. Soon after, the police arrived. Becky was arrested for trespassing and property damage. David had installed the security cameras both inside and outside our home. Thinking something might happen, given his status as a popular author, I thought it was necessary to protect you. His judgment was indeed correct. The cameras meticulously recorded everything from Becky's intrusion to her acts of violence. Without hesitation, David and I decided to file both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. A skilled lawyer, a friend of David, agreed to take our case. The footage from the security cameras will serve as decisive evidence. Additionally, if we can substantiate the past abuse, it will strengthen the grounds for our claim for damages. Initially, my father and Patty tried to intervene. They even suggested that it should be settled quietly, since it was a family matter. However, David responded firmly. "This is a crime. It's necessary to resolve this properly, including the long-term abuse Emma suffered." At the courtroom, Becky suddenly portrayed herself as a victim. "I suffered too. I was lonely. I've been living with my mother since I was born." However, the security camera footage eloquently spoke the truth. Her premeditated intrusion, random acts of destruction, and the violence against me. Why Becky had become so desperate was revealed during the trial. While working at a major advertising agency, Becky, known for her high pride and often domineering attitude towards her superiors, ignored all advice and made repeated errors in a crucial client campaign. The client, furious, terminated a contract worth several $1,000,000. The company suffered losses, and Becky was fired immediately. She had also been living with her boyfriend for 2 years but was kicked out on the day she was dismissed, after demanding expensive gifts and frequently sulking if not taken to high-end restaurants. It seems her unemployment was the last straw for him. After losing both her job and her home, she considered returning to her parents' home and called Patty, but her pride prevented her from disclosing her dismissal and breakup. These events drove Becky to the edge, leading her to try to destroy my happy life. Additionally, I submitted records of the years of abuse, diaries, photographs, testimonials. All supported my claims. As the trial progressed, David suggested something. "Why don't you turn your life story into a novel?" Initially hesitant, I found that writing helped me organize my thoughts little by little. Facing my trauma and putting it into words, I felt my emotional wounds gradually healing. David meticulously edited my manuscripts. Under his guidance, the story was refined. The manuscript submitted to the publisher received more attention than expected. This work will resonate with many people. True to the editor's words, The Broken Kaleidoscope garnered significant attention. The story, which depicted abuse within the family and the healing of emotional wounds, resonated with many readers. The trial ended with a complete victory for us. In addition to criminal penalties for Becky, she was ordered to pay a substantial amount in damages. In the judgment, the judge acknowledged the fact of the long-term psychological abuse I had suffered. This marked a significant turning point in my life. Following the verdict, my father and Patty deeply reflected on their actions. My father especially admitted his weakness in not protecting me and apologized. "It's all my fault. I ignored the signs and ran away. I'm truly sorry." These were the words I had been waiting for years to hear. 1 year after the judgment, I gave birth to my first child. "I want to give this child a loving environment." David quietly nodded beside me. "We will make sure of it." My father also changed. Prompted by the birth of his grandchild, he divorced Patty. Now he is trying to make up for the lost time with his daughter. The Broken Kaleidoscope is set to be made into a movie, and I have begun writing a sequel. My experiences seem to be a light for others suffering similarly. Every day, I receive letters from readers saying, "Your story gave me courage." My words, which depict the healing process of a wounded heart, might be helping others. This makes the suffering I endured feel slightly redeemed. David remains my understanding and supportive partner. Thanks to him, I continue to grow both as a writer and as a woman. Sometimes, I think about Becky. She has finished her sentence and is receiving counseling. Direct contact with me is forbidden. But she has sent an apology letter through her lawyer. Reading it, I felt for the first time that I understood her suffering. While I can't forgive her yet, I realize she too was a victim of a dysfunctional family relationship. And now, my child sleeps in my arms. Seeing this child smile inspires me to continue building a loving environment. One day in May, as the spring sunlight bathed the fresh greenery in a warm glow, I completed my final exam at Boston University's campus. The students around me exited the classroom with cheerful expressions. Meanwhile, a blend of joy and anxiety churned within me. My name is Sandra Gray. At 22 years old, I am graduating from this university alongside my twin sister, Diana. While we may look alike, our lives have taken entirely different paths. And now we find ourselves standing at yet another crossroads. Our differences have been apparent since we were old enough to recognize them. Diana is like a radiant sun. She is popular in class, excels academically, and is athletically gifted. She is trusted by teachers and always surrounded by admirers. On the other hand, I am like the moon. Quiet and introverted, I preferred spending my time in the library, deeply engrossed in mathematics and programming. Mathematics, in particular, became my sanctuary. When solving equations, I didn't have to compare myself to anyone else. I could simply be my true self. The attention directed toward me was always minimal. My existence served only to highlight Diana's brilliance. During elementary school, my birthday presents were always Diana's hand-me-downs. Even at Christmas, while Diana was given a brand new gaming console, I received old books or secondhand stationery. The disparity was glaringly obvious. In high school, I worked desperately hard. I was determined to prove my worth, overlooked by my parents, through tangible accomplishments. When I won the mathematics Olympiad, my parents said they were too busy with work and didn't attend. When Diana competed as the captain of her cheerleading team in the national championship, my parents took time off to cheer her on. The frustration I experienced at that moment remains vividly etched in my memory, as if it happened just yesterday. I will never forget the profound emptiness that washed over me when I stood on the podium to receive my gold medal, only to look out into the audience and realize that my parents were not there to share in my achievement. Only my grandmother, Virginia, attended, wrapping me in a warm and reassuring hug. "You have an incredible talent, Sandra," she said with a kindness that touched my heart. Those words became a wellspring of strength and encouragement for me in the years that followed. University life, for me, signified the beginning of a brand new chapter. Diana chose to major in business, while I delved into the field of computer science. The world of programming quickly became my sanctuary, a place where I could truly be myself. When I was coding, I felt an unparalleled sense of freedom. There was no need for comparisons. My abilities and efforts were the only things that mattered. For 4 years, I threw myself into my studies, working tirelessly and often sacrificing sleep to achieve my goals. Between classes, I took on an internship at a local tech company, where I honed my practical skills and gained real-world experience. My relentless efforts paid off, as I managed to maintain an impressive 3.8 GPA. I even secured job offers from leading companies, including Google. Diana, too, was remarkable in her achievements. She maintained a solid 3.5 GPA and ranked among the top performers in her business school. Our parents wholeheartedly celebrated Diana's success, calling her weekly to check on her progress and offer their support. Their communication with me, however, was sparse and limited to administrative matters, such as verifying tuition payments or handling other formalities. In the winter of my sophomore year, I achieved a significant milestone by winning my first major award. I secured first place in the National Student Programming Contest, a victory that marked a defining moment in my academic journey. With it came a $50,000 prize and the coveted opportunity for an internship in Silicon Valley. My achievement was featured in the local newspaper, and I also received formal recognition from the university for my accomplishment. However, my parents' reaction remained indifferent and unchanged. As graduation season approached, Boston University's campus came alive with vibrant greenery and a sense of hope. The refreshing May breeze seemed to carry with it the aspirations and dreams of the graduates for the future. Diana and I had our graduation ceremony scheduled just a week apart, hers on May 15th and mine on May 22nd. That 1-week gap felt like a poignant symbol of the disparity that had always existed in our lives. On the morning of Diana's graduation, the house was filled with bustling activity from the early hours. Mom had been tirelessly preparing since the day before, picking up Diana's dress from the cleaners, double-checking her hair and makeup appointments, and finalizing every detail of the party arrangements. "Diana, hurry up." Mom's voice echoed up the stairs. "You'll be late for your salon appointment." Meanwhile, I sat quietly in my room, focused on the glowing screen of my laptop. I was preparing for my new life, all the while listening to the lively commotion unfolding downstairs. The ceremony began promptly at 10 a.m. Our parents occupied the front row special seats, their faces beaming with pride as they watched Diana. Mom repeatedly dabbed at her eyes, overcome with emotion, while Dad puffed out his chest, basking in the admiration of those around him. Diana, as always, shone brilliantly. With the Chancellor's gold medal adorning her neck, she delivered a speech as the business school representative. Each word she spoke was met with enthusiastic applause from the audience. Our parents' faces radiated with uncontainable pride. After the ceremony, the celebration shifted to a high-end restaurant, Le Chateau. Dad had secured reservations at one of Boston's most prestigious French establishments. A venue where even private rooms required months of advance booking had been completely reserved for the day. The space, lavishly adorned with luxurious decorations, welcomed over 100 guests. Dad's colleagues from the investment bank, Mom's friends from her social circle, and relatives who had traveled from afar were all in attendance. Diana's college friends were also present in large numbers, adding to the celebratory atmosphere. A towering champagne fountain graced the center of the room, while a live orchestra played elegant music, setting a refined tone. Diana, carrying herself like a true princess, was the center of attention. Dressed in a stunning designer gown, she looked every bit the heroine of a fairy tale. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here today to celebrate our daughter Diana's graduation." Dad began his speech, and the room immediately fell silent in anticipation. "Diana is the pride of our family," he continued. "Her exceptional academic achievements at business school, her leadership in student council activities, and her bright future at a top consulting firm, where she has already secured a position, she has continually exceeded our expectations." The emotion in Dad's voice was unmistakable, as his pride radiated through every word. "And today we have a special gift prepared for her. Diana, would you come here for a moment?" Dad took Diana's hand and led her toward the restaurant's main entrance. The guests, curious and excited, eagerly followed behind. Parked in front of the entrance was a brand new white Porsche Cayenne. The car, freshly delivered from the dealership, still had its protective sheets in place and was elegantly adorned with a large ribbon. "Diana, this is your gift," Mom said through tears of joy as she handed Diana the car keys. Overcome with excitement, Diana let out a cheerful squeal and threw herself into her parents' arms. Cameras flashed and applause erupted. Mom kept snapping photos on her phone while Dad looked at his daughter with pride. "You've worked hard, and you've earned this reward," Mom said with emotion. Diana shed tears once more at Mom's heartfelt words. I observed the scene from a slight distance, my emotions in turmoil. A genuine happiness for Diana's success mixed with an undeniable pang of envy. And beneath it all, a lingering anxiety about my own graduation ceremony the following week. When my graduation morning arrived a week later, it felt like an entirely different world. My parents arrived late to the ceremony and quietly took seats in the back row. When I stepped on stage to receive my diploma, they gave only a brief and subdued round of applause. My 4.0 GPA, my victory in the National Programming Contest, and my job offer from Google. All of these achievements felt as though they were invisible, as if they didn't matter at all. That evening, we had a small celebration at home. Unlike the grand event with a large crowd from the previous week, this was a modest gathering with just my grandparents, an uncle, and a few close relatives. Mom was in the kitchen, busy baking a homemade chocolate cake. While it wasn't bad by any means, it stood in stark contrast to the luxurious cake flown in from Paris for Diana's celebration the week before. "Here, Sandra. This is your gift," Dad said, handing me a worn CD player in a plain cardboard box. It was an item he had once used in his study, but had recently replaced with a Bluetooth speaker, rendering it obsolete. "Thank you," I replied, forcing the brightest smile I could muster, even as my heart felt like it was on the verge of breaking. Was this really the reward for 4 years of relentless hard work? At that moment, something completely unexpected happened. Why does Diana receive a Porsche while Sandra only gets an old CD player? Grandma Virginia suddenly stood up and raised her voice, breaking the silence. The room froze instantly. The most dignified and respected figure in the family had spoken. Though over 80 years old, she retained her sharp intellect and was renowned for her keen judgment on family matters. It was rare for her to raise her voice. "Because Diana earned it through her hard work and excellent grades," Mom replied calmly, though her tone carried a subtle hint of unease. Grandma's eyes then burned with anger. "Sandra's grades were even better," she shot back, her voice growing stronger with each word. "A 4.0 GPA, a National Student Programming Contest victory, and a job offer from Google. Why are you treating her so unfairly?" Dad opened his mouth to offer an excuse, but Uncle Tom cut him off. Tom, usually the most mild-mannered of the family, raised his voice in frustration this time. "Joe, Kathy, you've always been like this. You ignore Sandra and shower all your attention on Diana. It's wrong." One by one, the other relatives began to speak up. Aunt Janice, Mom's sister, my cousin Lita, and finally even Grandpa Ricky. Each of them openly criticized my parents for their unfair treatment of me. "You've been discriminating against Sandra since she was little," Aunt Janice pointed out firmly. During Christmas and birthdays, Diana was always given brand new gifts, while Sandra had to make do with hand-me-downs. Lita continued, her tone sharp. "You always made time to attend Diana's school events, yet you consistently missed Sandra's, using work as an excuse." Uncle Tom added his voice to the growing chorus of criticism. And finally, Grandpa Ricky spoke, his tone heavy with authority. "We've kept silent for years, but we can no longer stand by. Showing such disparity in love between your children is the greatest mistake a parent can make." I was overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. For so long I had convinced myself that no one understood my pain, yet now I realized that many had been watching and caring all along. Overcome with emotion, I fled to my room. As I collapsed onto my bed, tears began streaming uncontrollably. I couldn't tell if they were tears of sadness or relief. The events of that night sent ripples far beyond what I could have imagined. Led by my grandparents, my relatives came together to organize a new graduation party in my honor. "Let's give Sandra the true celebration she deserves," Grandma proposed. "Let's create an opportunity to properly recognize her efforts and accomplishments." 2 weeks later, a new graduation party was held at another upscale restaurant in Boston. The venue was just as luxurious as the one for Diana's celebration, but the atmosphere was entirely different. In attendance were my grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, and my college friends, all gathered to celebrate me. The tables were beautifully adorned with photos and certificates that highlighted my achievements. My programming contest championship trophy, internship reports, and the job offer letter from Google were all proudly displayed. For the first time, my efforts long overlooked by my parents were finally receiving the recognition they deserved. My grandparents beamed with pride, as if they were celebrating their granddaughter's graduation for the very first time. My uncles and aunts appeared genuinely thrilled by my success, their joy unmistakable. My parents attended as well, but they remained seated quietly in a corner, saying nothing. The air of dignity they once carried was gone, and they now looked like chastened children. Diana sat beside me, offering occasional words of encouragement and support. During the party, Grandpa rose to his feet and announced that he had something important to share. As the room fell silent, he began to speak in a commanding tone that demanded everyone's attention. "Today, Virginia and I have made an important decision," he began, his voice calm yet resonating with authority. Every eye in the room turned to him, waiting in hushed anticipation. "We have decided to rewrite our will. Joe and Kathy will be entirely removed from inheritance rights, and instead, Sandra and Diana will receive our inheritance directly." His words sent shockwaves through the room, rippling out like a stone dropped into still water. I watched as the color drained from my parents' faces. Mom let out a faint gasp, while Dad clenched the arms of his chair tightly, his knuckles turning white. "This is our judgment in response to years of their unfair treatment," Grandpa continued, his voice unwavering. "Love should be equal. Favoring one child while neglecting the other is the gravest mistake a parent can make." Grandma then pulled out a set of documents, her movements calm yet purposeful. They were the newly revised wills, already notarized and legally binding. "This decision is final," she stated firmly. "Our assets will be divided equally between Sandra and Diana. They will receive our inheritance directly. Joe and Kathy will have no rights whatsoever." Dad stood up abruptly, his face contorted with a mix of anger and humiliation. "Dad, this is," he began, his voice rising. "That's enough," Joe Grandpa interjected sharply, his tone stern and unyielding. "For over 20 years you have discriminated against Sandra. You have proven yourselves unworthy as parents." Grandpa declared, his voice cutting through the room. Mom began to cry. But these tears were not born of remorse, they were tears of self-pity, mourning the punishment they now faced. "But she started," her voice trembling. Kathy Grandma interjected firmly, stepping forward with unshakable resolve. "You treated Sandra as an unwanted child from the moment she was born. We cannot entrust our inheritance to parents like you." Diana reached over and grasped my hand, her fingers trembling slightly. My parents, meanwhile, looked utterly defeated, as though they had lost everything: their status, their pride, and their dignity. Dad's face was ashen, and Mom slumped into her chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. The once dignified aura they had carried was now completely gone. At that moment, something shifted deep within me. The anger and resentment I had harbored toward my parents began to fade. In its place, a strange sense of pity emerged. They had sacrificed the true bonds of family on the altar of their favoritism. My grandparents' decision carried a significance that went far beyond the issue of inheritance. It was the realization of justice for years of unfair treatment, and it marked the beginning of a new family dynamic. The party continued quietly, but with a warm and comforting atmosphere. My parents left the venue early, silently excusing themselves. It was as if they had been released from a burden they had carried for years. Uncle Tom placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sandra, I'm truly proud of your success. From now on, walk your own path without worrying about anyone else's judgment." Grandma took Diana's hand and spoke to her softly. "You, too, are now free from the burden of your parents. From here on, you can decide your own life." Diana nodded, her eyes welling up with tears. "Sandra, this is from us," Grandma said, presenting me with a Lexus. As applause filled the room, I accepted the gift with a sense of pride. It wasn't about wanting a gift. For the first time in my life, I felt truly recognized by someone. Diana approached me. "Sandra." Her eyes were brimming with tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "No," I pretended not to notice. I looked at my sister in silence. "The Porsche." "I don't want it," she said. "I'm giving it back to our parents." I couldn't respond immediately. To be honest, I had never liked Diana much. Even though we were twins, It was clear we had been raised with such stark favoritism. There were times when I had resented her for it. But now, standing in front of Diana, I realized something new. It wasn't her fault. The true wedge that had driven us apart was our parents. With that understanding, I felt a desire to forgive her, to start building a new relationship with my sister. Of course, I might not be able to forgive her completely right away, but little by little. I thought that forgiveness was something necessary in life. So, I smiled and said, "You don't need to do that. This is about our parents. It's not your fault." For the first time in a long while, we opened our hearts and talked. We reminisced about childhood memories, discussed our complicated relationship with our parents, and shared our fears for the future. She admitted that our parents' favoritism had affected our bond and said she wanted to face me as a true sister from now on. Later that night, I was called into my grandparents' study. On the heavy wooden desk lay the new will. Grandma began to speak in a calm tone. "Your parents have tried to control everyone with the power of money. Especially Diana, they've placed the weight of their expectations on her as a form of bondage. We wanted to break that cycle." The documents detailed every aspect of the arrangement. The inheritance was to be equally divided between Diana and me, with no involvement from our parents. There were even protective clauses to shield us from any attempts by our parents to exert pressure on us. But, Mom and Dad, I struggled to find the words. "They'll be furious," Grandpa replied quietly. "They will. Perhaps there will be significant ripples for a while. But this is a necessary decision," Grandpa said. That prediction came true almost immediately. The next morning, I received an angry phone call from Mom. "What are you scheming?" Her voice was frantic. "Are you trying to ruin us? Destroy this family?" From Dad, I received a threatening letter through his lawyer. He claimed he would contest the validity of the will and warned that he would expose the family's shame publicly. However, my grandparents' decision was legally airtight. Their protests had no effect. One Sunday morning, I was in my room, sorting through my belongings. Preparing for my new life at Google, I packed away mementos of my past into boxes, a task that turned out to be far more emotional than I had expected. The medal from the Mathematics Olympiad, certificates from programming contests, and photos from my high school years. Each item was a testament to efforts that had gone unacknowledged. Then my phone rang. Seeing Mom displayed on the screen made my heart feel as though it had stopped for a moment. I hadn't spoken to my parents since that morning. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Sandra," Mom said, her voice sharper than usual. "Mom," I replied, equally formal. "Your dad is here too. I'm putting this on speakerphone." After a brief silence, I heard Dad's voice. But it wasn't an apology or an offer of reconciliation. Instead, they tried to justify their actions. "Sandra, I think we need to talk," Dad began, his voice regaining its usual authoritative tone. "We did our best for you. We gave you an education, sent you to college. So why would you humiliate us in front of the family?" At those words, I instinctively closed my eyes. The condescension embedded in the phrase "gave you an education," as if they had bestowed a special favor upon me. It perfectly encapsulated their true nature. "We thought about you," too, Mom added, her voice tinged with self-pity. "But Diana had a special talent. We just wanted to help her reach her full potential." In that moment, something inside me broke irreparably. The disappointment and pain of over 20 years surged forth like a dam bursting. Memories from my childhood flashed before me, like a slideshow. Each recollection felt like a needle piercing my heart. "I'm grateful for the education you provided," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. But that was merely fulfilling the minimum responsibility of being a parent. Love cannot be bought with money. On the other end of the line, I heard a faint gasp. "You never saw me as a person," I continued, my voice steady but firm. The words flowed out uncontrollably. "You treated me as a supporting role for Diana, as an unnecessary existence. And now, you want to talk about parental love. Outside the window, birds chirped. The world moved on as if it were just another ordinary Sunday morning. Yet within this room, something irreparable was happening. On the other end of the line, Mom began to cry. But these tears weren't from acknowledging her mistakes. They were the tears of a victim, crying because she felt wronged. "I didn't raise you to be this way," she sobbed. "You're seeing everything through a twisted perspective." That crossed the final line. It was the moment the ice shattered completely. My eyes fell on the family photo sitting on my desk. A seemingly happy family of 4. But on closer inspection, I was the only one standing slightly apart. It wasn't an accident, it symbolized our relationship. "That's enough," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "There's no need for further contact. I am no longer your daughter." Dad tried to say something, but I ended the call. Silence returned to the room. After placing the phone down, I slowly stood up and put the family photo into a box. A box that I knew I would never open again. I looked out the window. The full moon quietly illuminated the night sky. For the next few days, I ignored all calls and messages from my parents. I blocked them on social media and marked their emails as spam. It was a necessary step for my new life. Grandma called out of concern, but I reassured her. "Sandra, are you sure about this?" Her voice carried a mix of worry and understanding. "Yes, Grandma." "This is my choice," I replied, my voice surprisingly firm. "I see. I'll support your decision. But if you ever change your mind, thank you. But I don't think I'll ever go back." This isn't an ending, it's a beginning. After hanging up, I gazed out the window, lost in thought. Sometimes, to start something new, we must first bring something else to an end. For me, it was the end of my relationship with my parents and the beginning of true freedom. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in a long while. My heart was already set in motion, ready for the new life ahead. A month after the separation, I moved to Silicon Valley. I started working as a software engineer at Google and began a new chapter in my own apartment. Work was fulfilling. My technical skills were highly regarded, and within 6 months, I was entrusted with a major project. At the office, no one cared about my family background. Being evaluated purely for my abilities was a relief I hadn't experienced before. I stay in regular contact with Diana, slowly rebuilding our bond as sisters. Diana has decided to walk her own path. "I spent my whole life trying to meet our parents' expectations and lost sight of who I really am," she told me. "We are both finding freedom in our own ways. Free from the shackles and expectations of our parents, we are starting to live our own lives." The other day, I received a thick envelope from my parents. Inside were 2 letters, one on my father's company letterhead, written formally, and another handwritten by my mother, filled with sentimentality. "Dear Sandra." My father's letter began in a businesslike tone. "Your recent success has become a topic of interest even in the investment banking industry. We are proud of you. Don't you think it's time to resolve our misunderstandings and reconcile?" My mother's letter was far more emotional. "Sandra, we have loved you in our own way. It's true that we gave Diana special attention, but you have always been a cherished daughter." As I read on, a cold smirk formed on my face. Their true intentions were painfully clear. My father's company was planning a large-scale technology investment and hoped to secure a deal with Google. They wanted to make use of my position. Additionally, having lost access to my grandparents' vast inheritance, they were clearly seeking a new financial lifeline. Not a single word of apology, I murmured, analyzing the letters calmly. In response, I sent a legal document back through my grandparents' attorney. The document included a detailed record of my parents' discriminatory actions over the past 20 years, evidence of financial inequalities, and statements from a psychological counselor. And finally, I included a clear refusal regarding their desire to secure a deal with Google. Your actions may fall under the definitions of domestic violence or harassment. If you attempt to contact me or Diana again, I will consider taking legal action." Desperate calls from my parents came repeatedly, but my phone number had already been changed. Emails from them were automatically filtered into my spam folder. Through updates from my grandparents, I later learned about my parents' distress. My father had failed in securing the deal and was reportedly in a precarious position at his company. My mother had lost her standing in social circles and had fallen into depression. Yet my heart remained calm. This wasn't about revenge. It was simply proof that I had completely freed myself from the control disguised as warped love. "Well done," Sandra, my grandfather said, fully supporting my decision. "Now, you can truly begin a new life." I gazed out the window. The Silicon Valley sunset shone, as if promising a bright future ahead. No one will ever control my life again. This is the path I've chosen. The separation from my parents was both a liberation and a new beginning. Above all, I've come to know that my life belongs to me alone. And that is a truth no one can take away. This is my experience of being kicked out of my home by my mother and stepfather. After my half-sister was born, I was thrown out of the house, and years later, I would take my revenge. I am 25 years old, and I was driven out of the house 6 years ago when my mother was 45. At that time, my stepfather was 49. My half-sister is significantly younger than me. My grandparents, who were strict and traditional, forced my mother to have children. When my mother became pregnant with me, she wanted to keep it a secret. However, my biological father was unaware of this and announced it to her family before she could say anything. When my mother took a pregnancy test, my father was ecstatic about the result. Without waiting for my mother's confirmation, he shared the news with her family. They broke up shortly afterward. In fact, they were never married, and due to various obstacles, they eventually went their separate ways. My parents met after entering college and dated for a year. After discovering the pregnancy, my father foolishly abandoned my mother. However, my mother couldn't bring herself to get rid of me. Her family already knew about the pregnancy and threatened to disown her if she had an abortion. Thus, she had no choice but to give birth to me. This is a story I know very well. My mother told me this story many times, enough to make me realize how fortunate I am. If my mother had made a different choice, I might not be here today. She always said I was the product of my father's mistake, which fueled her anger. She seemed to harbor resentment towards me and felt raising me was a burden. My grandparents kept me as out of sight as possible, and my great-grandparents, who had already passed away by the time I was born, never knew what had happened. As my childhood came to an end, many difficult things happened to me, but they are hard to talk about. My mother felt burdened by me, but my father did not. My mother despised me because she neither wanted me nor accepted me. If it weren't for family pressure, she would not have given birth to me. She also claimed that my existence hindered her career progress. She had to juggle college and work, and taking care of me meant sacrificing a lot. She resented this and was strict with me. However, I lacked nothing during my childhood. My grandparents supported us financially. My father paid child support, but didn't show the kind of affection I wanted. To my mother, I was only a burden, and she had no high expectations for me. She never spoke to me warmly or showed any affection. Even when I achieved something, she didn't celebrate it and treated me like a difficult older roommate. She always harbored hatred towards me and wanted to kick me out of the house as soon as possible. On the other hand, my father felt kinder in comparison to my mother. However, he was powerless as a parent and struggled with substance abuse during my early years. At the time, I didn't realize it, but now I'm sure he was dependent on marijuana. He often acted strangely and made bizarre comments, but it was mostly to entertain me. He never missed my birthday parties or family dinners, so I didn't think much of it. I don't hate him, but I often hear criticism of his actions. My mother didn't want me, but she didn't let go of me because of family pressure. My father lacked the ability to take care of me. Honestly, their judgment wasn't wrong. Decisions had to be made about who would raise me. Even before I was born, my mother's family put the responsibility on her, and my father only cared for me on weekends. When I was 10, I started living with my mother full-time. I could only see my father a few times a month. Eventually, I was allowed to live with him only on weekends, but that didn't seem to go well. At just 10 years old, I realized my father was still not ready to take on the role of a parent. He lived in a modest apartment, couldn't afford the lifestyle my mother enjoyed, and was in a poor environment. The living room always carried the distinct smell of marijuana, and my mother constantly complained about it. My father wanted me to spend several days a week with him, but my mother opposed this and only allowed weekend visits. Even so, the time I spent with my father brought me a bit of relief. Although family life wasn't ideal, at least I felt accepted. Despite being in a difficult situation, my father did everything he could for me. At times, we only had one meal a day at his house, but he still tried to comfort me. My childhood was spent enduring constant pressure from my mother while needing to face my father on weekends. When I was 15, my mother met her new partner, John. He wasn't a bad person, but he wasn't particularly great either. To be honest, he was indifferent to me, but he was still better than my mother. My father wasn't particularly interested in me either, but talking with him gave me a sense of reassurance. My mother and John spent several days together and got married when I was 17. 2 years later, when my mother became pregnant again, I didn't worry much about it. For me, it didn't affect my daily life, and I continued my usual routine. At 18, I chose to take a gap year and pursued practical work experience instead of immediately going to college. However, I later regretted this decision. My grandparents were prepared to pay for my college education, but shortly after I turned 18, my mother and grandparents had a fierce argument, which resulted in the end of financial support for me. This forced me to live independently, but I managed to support myself through an internship I had joined at the time. When I was 19, I applied to a university and was quickly accepted. At the time, my mother was 7 months pregnant, but she didn't provide me with any information. Eventually, my half-sister was born. After returning home from the hospital, my mother and John sat me down for an important conversation, and I was a bit surprised. My mother said, "The new baby needs a new room in the house." They mentioned hiring a full-time babysitter and setting up a room for her. It was time for me to give up my room and leave the house. Since I was already 19 and legally an adult, staying at home felt unnatural. At that time, I considered moving in with my father. However, he was struggling with drug issues and had also developed a gambling addiction. His home had become a place no one wanted to visit anymore. Until then, my maternal grandparents had been very close to my mother, so there had never been financial concerns. They were willing to support me for my mother's sake. However, after my mother's fight with them, their relationship ended, and so did their bond with me. I had no choice but to accept this reality. I tried contacting them several times but was unsuccessful. The situation deteriorated to the point where I was nearly thrown out. However, I decided to pay for my own college tuition. Since I was pursuing an education, I expected my mother to contribute during the application process. I understood that my mother hated me, but attending college meant becoming independent from my family, so she ultimately agreed to support me. Later, she told me she would kick me out of the house. I asked her for financial assistance for my college education, but she looked at me, laughed, and said, "Not only am I going to kick you out, but I'm also cutting all ties with you. Here's $100. Get out of here." She then threw $100 at me. I was stunned and shocked by her coldness. I never imagined someone could be so cruel. When I started crying, she frowned and said, "If you're going to cry, do it outside." She didn't want her house to be sullied. Before that day, I had been living relatively contentedly, though I never voiced anything to my mother. I wanted to avoid arguments with her and didn't want to waste my time. However, on that fateful day, speaking up for myself ultimately led to me being thrown out of the house. On the surface, I remained silent, but deep down, I felt she was an incredibly awful mother. Finally, I became certain that removing her from my life would significantly improve my future. She declared without looking back. "It doesn't matter. I have my husband and my real daughter, so I don't need you anymore." Upon hearing those words, I felt deep despair once again and thought, this is the worst day of my life. Still, I managed to stay somewhat composed, packed my belongings, and left that house. Since that day, I have never looked back at that house. The $100 handed to me as severance money. What could I possibly start with that? In reality, it was impossible to hope for any significant change with that amount. I immediately headed to my father's house, determined to improve my situation from scratch, no matter how difficult it might be. When I arrived at my father's house, he was in terrible shape, and the condition of the house was even worse. The floors were covered in trash, with no sign of cleaning having been done. My father had been unemployed for a long time and had lost his funds through gambling. Moreover, after his father passed away a few months earlier, he squandered the inheritance left to him. My father was happy to see me again, but he was high on drugs and unable to hold a coherent conversation. That day, I was already feeling down and at my limit. When I saw my father smoking marijuana, I grabbed his hand tightly and pleaded, "You need to act like a real father." I felt that his unhealthy habits could destroy my life as well. Being kicked out by my mother and unable to rely on my father only deepened my despair. At that moment, I picked up some marijuana that had fallen on the floor, filled with disappointment and regret. Overcome with despair, I struck my father once, then immediately apologized, but he stormed off to his room in anger. In the end, I spent the night in the living room. The next morning, my father asked me what had happened. Now sober, I told him everything. I explained the situation in detail and told him that I needed his support and that his cooperation was essential. For that to happen, he needed to quit gambling and drugs. When my father learned that my mother had kicked me out, he was shocked. He tried calling my mother, but she didn't answer. That day, I decided to live with my father. Although he didn't have financial stability, he promised to do his best for me. However, the process was far from easy and was a constant struggle. There were times when my father would revert to his old habits, but I continued to support him. He promised me, "I'll keep trying." It was disappointing that I couldn't attend college, but I couldn't waste time, so I applied for multiple internship programs. I received offers from several companies, some with good pay, but I had to decline them due to the long working hours and my family situation. At that time, my father showed no willingness to improve his life. While seeking support from my father, I resolved to improve my own situation as much as possible. Whether I was working or not, the house had to be clean and organized at all times. However, my father continued living the same lifestyle as before. He had been searching for a job for a long time, but employers avoided him due to his tarnished reputation. In the past, he had struggled with addiction issues at work, which became a significant obstacle for both him and me. Amid these hardships, 3 years ago, we finally experienced a stroke of luck. My father began working as a store clerk. Though the pay was low and the hours were long, I worked as an accountant, which was a boring desk job. However, a high school friend from another state offered me a job through her father, who was opening a new branch. Her parents divorced years ago, but every time she returned during holidays, we met up. She understood my past difficulties and even offered financial support for my college tuition, but I couldn't bring myself to accept her money. I couldn't bear the burden of debt. Her father ran a major office supply business and recently decided to expand his operations. When she offered me this new job, I agreed to take it. I also suggested that my father work as a warehouse manager. Given his qualifications and prior experience, it was an ideal position for him. Thus, we moved into a new phase, and things started to take a turn for the better. My father has completely stopped using marijuana and no longer gambled. We moved into a better living environment, and things have been going smoothly for the past 2 years. 6 years ago, it would have been impossible to imagine our current state. I hadn't been in contact with my mother for a long time, but 2 weeks ago, she reached out to me. She seemed to be in need of some help. I sensed that something serious was happening. Shortly after I left home, she quit her job and started a new business with John, but it didn't last long. I don't know the exact reason, but they kept pouring money into it and eventually went bankrupt. They were left with an enormous amount of debt and had to sell everything they owned to repay it. Through relatives, she seemed to have heard that my father said, "We've moved to a better home and are satisfied with our current life." For that reason, she decided it was appropriate to reach out and ask for help. She didn't apologize but simply said, "Come back home." She also asked me to forget all the past. She mentioned she had a young daughter and was worried about her future. And if I had the capacity, she wanted me to support them and take on some of their debt. I was astonished by her bold demands. It was as if she hadn't considered at all how she had treated me in the past. I pretended to agree with her over the phone and decided to listen to her for a few days. But to be honest, I had no intention of giving her any money, nor did I have any intention of solving her debt problems. I told her, "I'll look into it." But I wasn't sincere and planned only to listen to her. What she mainly talked about were their financial troubles, but from the beginning, I had no intention of helping them. This entire approach was calculated, but she didn't realize it and showed no sign of apologizing to me. As a result, any guilt I might have felt about my actions gradually faded. 2 days ago, she finally contacted me asking for financial support. I responded clearly, "I can't send you money." She realized she'd been deceived, and I reminded her of how she had treated me in the past, including how horribly she had treated me as a child. I felt it was completely unreasonable for her to expect help from me. Since she had never apologized, I told her I had no reason to hold any expectations for her. "You were a horrible person and an even worse mother. Did you ever think about me, even once?" I said to her. And before she could say anything, I hung up the call. After that, I ignored all further attempts from her to contact me. Eventually, her attempts to reach me stopped. My relatives have already read the posts I wrote about my mother and understand how she treated me in the past. It was necessary to bring the truth about her to light. My mother always pretended to be kind and a successful career woman, but it was all a facade. I believe my actions were justified, but my father thinks I went too far. He said, it would have been enough to just ignore her. I agree with his point that playing games with someone seeking help is cruel. However, all of this was intentional on my part. I feel it is fair, since my mother was once cold and cruel to me. Not everything has to be perfect like in the movies, nor do I feel obligated to set an example for others. Still, my father says, that was excessive. And now I'm wondering if I should apologize. I'm questioning whether paying off my toxic mother's debts and supporting her afterward is truly the right thing to do. I felt the need to discuss past events and decided to sit down and talk with my father. In the end, I'm glad I did so. My father wasn't always a very proactive parent. For most, if not all, of my childhood, he was high and didn't care about anything. My father barely remembered how terribly my mother treated me or how she behaved toward me. He enjoyed spending time with me but wasn't truly there for me. My father recognized that my actions were rooted in anger. My behavior was the result of years of accumulated resentment. He also understood that it wasn't right. Even if it wasn't moral or ethical, my mother had no intention of apologizing, and I had no intention of apologizing to her either. I was shocked that, despite never having apologized, she still expected help from me. It has been a week since I last heard from her. While I've received many messages from various people, I have no interest in talking about my mother anymore. I have plenty of other work to deal with and no time left for drama. About 2 weeks after our phone call, my mother contacted me again saying, "I regret trusting you." She admitted she regretted having a daughter who betrayed her despite trusting me, but I felt the same way about her. My childhood was so difficult because of her that I sometimes felt it would have been better to be an orphan. My mother no longer lives in this town, saying she left out of shame and humiliation, but honestly, I don't care at all where she is now. Wherever she is, it no longer affects my life. She blocked me on social media, and we both agreed to stop contacting each other. A month has passed since my mother moved, and things have quieted down significantly. According to relatives, she isn't talking to any family members or anyone else. This might be for the best for her. My father and I are still doing well. My father recently got a raise, and our life is going smoothly. I still haven't been able to attend college, but I hope to go someday when I have more stability. Recently, I heard that my mother is going through divorce proceedings with John. At first, I was surprised, but thinking about her personality, it wasn't that shocking. She says she's worried about me, but it's hard to take her concerns seriously. I hope this situation isn't just another one of her schemes. For now, I'm focusing on my work, my health, and my relationship with my father. The only thing that weighs on my mind is my half-sister. What kind of environment is she growing up in? It pains me to think that she might continue to grow up under such a mother. I used to believe that my mother was at least kinder to her than she was to me, but then an unexpected message arrived. Is this my big sister? Was the message sent from an unfamiliar number? The message was from my 6-year-old half-sister. She had secretly borrowed my mother's phone to contact me. According to her, she knows me as the amazing and cool big sister who does great work. I was surprised to hear that my mother spoke about me so positively. I had never received such recognition before. My sister told me that things between my mother and John were terrible and that the household was always tense. Hearing that my 6-year-old sister felt lonely in such a difficult family environment broke my heart. When she said, "I want to meet you," the barriers in my heart began to crumble. I never imagined that my sister saw me this way. For 6 years, I hadn't been able to see her because of my mother and John. Despite that, she had loved me as her big sister, with a pure heart all this time. Our first meeting took place at a park. It was a secret meeting, without my mother knowing. My sister cherished a photo of me and spoke excitedly about her dream of wearing a suit and working like my big sister. Later, with the divorce of her parents and worsening financial difficulties, her situation became even more unstable. Despite my hesitation, I couldn't abandon her as her older sister. In the end, my father and I took her in. We faced many difficult situations to get to this point, but now it feels like the best decision. My father has completely overcome his past issues with drug addiction and gambling, and has become a great support for my half-sister. For him, her presence has been a new beginning in life. My mother eventually agreed to let us live with my half-sister. We've arranged for my mother to meet with her daughter once a month, but I still haven't faced my mother directly. While my half-sister's relationship with my mother is separate, my feelings toward my mother remain complicated. When I think about the past, I find it hard to forgive her. However, my half-sister's innocence slowly melts away the bitterness in my heart. Sometimes, family bonds are nurtured in the most unexpected ways. From a young age, my sister exhibited a very self-centered personality, continuously displaying this attitude towards our family. The behavior of my sister went beyond mere childishness. Whenever her desires were not fulfilled, she often reacted strongly, which significantly impacted our lives. Such an attitude was evident early on, with one incident particularly memorable when she was about 5 or 6 years old. One evening, while our mother was preparing dinner, my sister wanted some sweets and showed her displeasure when she didn't get them, suddenly throwing a terrible tantrum. Our parents tried to talk to her calmly, but she wouldn't listen at all and kept on crying loudly, following her emotions. Witnessing this, our entire house felt unstable, and an awkward silence filled the air. At that time, I was still quite young myself and didn't fully grasp how troublesome my sister's tantrums could be for the family, yet the situation left a strong impression on me. Seeing the whole family confused and swayed by her emotions, I felt a strong aversion. The sudden explosions of my sister's emotions disrupted the peace in our home one after another, making it difficult for us to spend our days calmly. Although my sister was young, these tantrums posed a significant challenge in her upbringing and were an issue that needed to be considered within the entire family's emotional state. It is also true that I often felt a sense of helplessness as we got dragged into these situations time and time again. The incident involving a pricey doll that my sister wanted was particularly shocking to me. This doll was well known and expensive enough that even I was aware of it, and it was understandable that our parents hesitated to buy it. Because of its high price, it was not something our family could easily afford, and our parents tried to explain this to my sister. However, she did not understand their explanation at all. Unable to control her emotions, she suddenly started crying and threw a tantrum. More surprisingly, she even acted out against our parents. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw my young sister angrily lash out and raise her hand against our older parents, an abnormal situation. At that moment, I was at a loss for words, standing frozen in place from the sheer shock. Normally, one would expect a firm response to such behavior, but our parents were desperate to calm the situation and appease her. By the end of the day, they had compromised and decided to buy an alternative doll for her. Although this was clearly a result of giving in to my sister's whims, perhaps my parents were too exhausted and tried to settle the situation by appeasing her. This event was shocking for me and merely reinforced the extent of the impact my sister's tantrums had on the family. Watching my parents repeatedly compromise in response to her inappropriate reactions increasingly seemed to encourage her behavior. The whole family was swayed by these tantrums, and ultimately, my sister learned that her demands would be met, seemingly gaining more control over those around her. I was concerned about how this situation would develop in the future and felt anxious that this negative cycle would continue unless my sister's behavior improved. My sister's strategy of throwing tantrums to get what she wanted was effective, and our parents often succumbed to it. By the time she was 7 or 8 years old, it seemed that she had de facto decision-making power within the family. At that point, the family being swayed by my sister's demands had become a daily norm. Unconsciously, everyone prioritized her wishes, and various decisions were made according to what she wanted. Even something as simple as how to spend a holiday was decided based on her desires, without significant consideration for other family members' opinions or wishes. The choice of dinner menu, where to go for outings, and even which restaurant to dine out at were mostly dictated by my sister's preferences. The surroundings and opinions of other family members were mostly ignored, resulting in a family life centered around her, tailored to her wishes. If I had been an outsider observing this scene, it would likely have appeared quite strange and uncomfortable. However, for us, that was the reality, and we accepted it without question. It was clear to me that our parents were treating my sister specially. On the surface, they seemed to claim they treated everyone equally. They appeared to be considerate so I wouldn't feel dissatisfied, but the reality was evident. My sister was favored. Her demands were prioritized. And I felt I was treated as if, "This should be enough for you." This unfairness gradually became painful for me, and I increasingly felt my position in the family becoming unstable. I understood why our parents were especially considerate towards my sister. She often exploded in emotions and threw tantrums, and they were trying to smoothly handle her behavior. However, the ongoing situation, where the whole family was affected by her influence, led to escalating demands and disrupted the balance within our home. One year on my birthday, I asked for an item I wanted, but my parents declined, citing financial difficulties. I tried to accept this decision. However, just a few weeks later, the latest electronic device my sister demanded was bought for her as if nothing was amiss. This event was a significant shock for me and strongly highlighted the clear difference in attitude between my parents towards my sister and me. From a young age, my sister had a personality that made excessive demands on those around her, and this became more pronounced as she grew older, turning into a domestic issue. Our parents excessively accommodated her, prioritizing giving her what she wanted, whereas such allowances were seldom made for me. However, I also understood that this did not mean I was unloved. I knew in my head that our parents were not intentionally being unfair to either of us. Still, dissatisfaction gradually accumulated in my heart. My sister's minor requests were immediately fulfilled, whereas when I asked for something similar, I was often refused with "Let's see the situation," or "Think about it later," as excuses. This felt unfair to me, and I couldn't help but feel left out. When I thought deeply about this, I could understand that my parents were not maliciously treating either of us. Yet it still felt like a very unfair treatment to me. This discriminatory treatment gradually built up in my heart over time, and I couldn't help but question the clear differences between my sister and me. Since she was young, my sister has been making excessive demands and acting spoiled, which our parents must have been aware of. Despite this, they treated her leniently and continued to meet her demands. As her demands escalated and became the norm, I became hesitant to ask for anything, and my position within the family became increasingly ambiguous. As this situation repeated itself, I grew increasingly frustrated and felt that I had to resolve this unfairness somehow. Although my parents' intention was to indulge her so her emotions are taken care of, it resulted in me becoming like a sacrificial lamb, and it was very hard to bear this imbalance. The distribution of roles and priorities within the family became more explicit, and I felt confusion and dissatisfaction with these differences. These experiences caused me significant emotional conflict. As a result, I carried the burden alone, and I still remember how dissatisfaction accumulated over the days. The inequality was even more pronounced during family vacations. The decision-making power for travel destinations was with my sister, and her opinions were prioritized as a matter of course. Even when I suggested, "I want to relax in a place rich in nature," it was quickly overturned by my sisters. "I prefer theme parks." Although there were moments when the whole family discussed it, in the end, it was always my sister's wishes that prevailed, and my suggestions were mostly ignored. Looking back now as an adult, I find it hard to accept the situation where my sister seemed to be the center of the family. Back then, all I could do within such a family was to try desperately to attract our parents' attention like my sister. I believed that getting good grades in school and being diligent in helping around the house were ways to gain their approval. However, I was rarely treated specially, like my sister. Despite being troubled by this situation, I struggled to find my place, but ultimately, I only remember feeling a one-sided fatigue. This situation continued not only during my childhood but also through my adolescence, and for me, my sister represented the symbol of inequality in the family. As a result, I harbored complex feelings towards our parents, and the space called home ceased to be a place of comfort and happiness. The confusion began when my parents asked, "What do you want for Christmas?" I expressed my wish to replace my phone, which was nearing the end of its life, with a new one. Meanwhile, my sister requested a surprising gift. At dinner in late November, my sister suddenly made a taunting remark. "My present will definitely be more luxurious than yours," laughing as she said it. A bit shocked, I asked, "Why do you always try to put yourself above me?" Without hesitation, she replied with a mocking tone, "Of course, because I am more loved by our parents than you are." The atmosphere became heavy in an instant. Her words could be taken as a joke, but for me it was a moment that sharply reminded me of the inequality I had always felt. Having felt from a young age that my sister was treated specially within the family, I harbored strong dissatisfaction and disappointment each time I heard such words. Yet even then, our parents showed no reaction to my sister's behavior and ignored the topic. Needless to say, This only deepened the wound in my heart. These seemingly trivial exchanges accumulated, making Christmas, which should have been a joyous occasion, a time filled with complex emotions for me. My sister's presence and the special treatment she received always cast a shadow over my heart. The atmosphere seemed on the verge of a light argument, but ultimately, the discussion didn't progress further at that moment. We continued our meal in silence, ending the topic without saying anything more. However, my sister's remarks continued to linger in my mind. Finally, the long-awaited Christmas arrived, and the moment to open the presents came. When I opened the box, it contained the new mobile phone I had hoped for, an iPhone 13. The moment I held it, I was overjoyed and spontaneously thanked my parents. In addition to the phone, I received practical items like deodorant and socks. But most importantly, having the long-awaited mobile phone filled me with satisfaction. Then it was my sister's turn to open her present. The moment she opened the first box, her eyes lit up, and she joyfully exclaimed. Inside was a compact Gucci bag, something she had long wanted. Her expression brightened. For her, that Christmas turned out to be more than ideal, and I couldn't help but feel astonished beyond jealousy. While I would like to think that Christmas presents are not a symbol of one's worth, through this event, I was painfully reminded once again that my sister was a special presence within our family. However, my sister merely said, "Thank you," formally, appearing somehow unsatisfied. Whether it was different from what she expected, or she had other thoughts, a shadow seemed to lurk behind her smile. Finally, she burst into tears and muttered, "I can't believe this turned out like this," before running upstairs. Left behind, my parents and I were at a loss for words, not understanding what had happened. About an hour after my sister had locked herself in her room, she came back downstairs. She openly expressed her emotions, starting to complain. "My present is of lesser value than yours." We were all surprised, but even more so when my sister brought out her smartphone and started checking the prices of the gifts she received. She verified the price of the Gucci bag on a website. Then, comparing it to the mobile phone I received, she began to claim that her present was unfairly less valuable. According to her research, my new mobile phone was about $200 more expensive than the bag she received. It seemed that this slight monetary difference was perceived as a significant issue by my sister. Witnessing her almost obsessive actions, I felt her character and values were starkly highlighted in that moment. Dissatisfied, my sister directly demanded that I give her the $200 difference in cash. Shocked by such an unreasonable request, I firmly refused, saying, "There's no way I would do such a ridiculous thing." At that moment, my sister's anger became uncontrollable and exploded. I still don't understand why I had left my new mobile phone on the table at that time. I suppose I didn't expect her to become so furious and felt too secure. However, this optimistic judgment led to a tragic outcome. As her anger reached peak, she grabbed my new mobile phone without hesitation and threw it with full force towards the wall. The sound was ear-piercing, and the next moment, the phone smashed against the wall, shattering into pieces and scattering across the floor. I stood there speechless. The scene before my eyes was so surreal that I could only stare in dismay. But gradually, a deep anger began to well up inside me. When I finally spoke, my words poured out uncontrollably. "Why would you do such a thing? My phone isn't just an object. It had important data in it, and I really liked it." I was surprised at how clearly my words of criticism towards my sister came out. "I understand you're upset, but this is too much. Did you think breaking it would solve anything? In the end, it only causes me trouble." My sister didn't respond at all at the moment, just averted her gaze with a stern expression. This attitude made me even more irritated. "I'm willing to listen and want to help, but how can we build trust if you do things like this? Don't think everything is forgiven just because you're my sister." While saying this, I felt as if the hopes I had for a kinder, mutually respectful relationship with her had shattered just like the phone. Staring at the pieces scattered on the floor, I managed to say, "You'll be paying for the repairs. If you can't manage that, think about how to control your anger. I can't forgive this kind of behavior ever again." I tried to appear calm, but my shaking voice couldn't completely hide my emotions. As silence enveloped the room, I felt a deep rift forming between us once again. While waiting for my sister to say something, I stood enveloped by the slightly cold air of the room. After a while, I carefully picked up each piece of the broken phone and, holding them all in my hands, headed up to my room on the second floor. As I climbed the stairs, I couldn't help but question what I had done wrong and why my relationship with my sister had deteriorated to this extent. Feeling that my sister's actions were excessively over the top, I finally decided to call the police. This decision came after much deliberation, but it seemed essential to me. However, in response to this, my parents criticized me, merely hurling insults and calling me such an arrogant daughter, showing no signs of taking the situation seriously. I couldn't help but feel very disappointed by their attitude. My contacting the police meant that this issue could no longer be contained within our family. With the police involved, details of the incident spread among our relatives, leading many of them to express their opinions on the matter. Our relatives didn't just blame my sister. They also directed criticism at our parents for continuing to indulge her whims and letting the situation worsen to this point. "Isn't this the result of your neglect? Why did you spoil only her and neglect your other daughter?" Harsh opinions were voiced one after another. Every time I heard such criticism, it seemed that the unjust treatment I had received from my parents was finally recognized, and I felt relieved. At the same time, I wondered why this situation had been allowed to persist for so long. The strict remarks and pressure from our relatives significantly impacted my parents. It became clear that they could no longer keep this as a mere family issue, and they finally had to admit their long-standing mistakes. It was our leniency that kept accepting her whims, they said in an unusually subdued tone. When I saw my parents talking like this, I felt a complex mix of emotions. While there was a sense of catharsis as the long-standing distrust and feelings of inequality in my family began to clear, there was also regret and emptiness that these issues hadn't been resolved earlier. This incident became a significant turning point for our family, especially for my parents, who had to rethink the importance of treating all family members equally. My parents eventually decided to change their indulgent behavior towards my sister and resolved to enforce strict discipline. As a first step, my father proposed that my sister live for a period at the farm managed by our grandparents. My father's parents are farmers, and he himself grew up working on that farm, learning about diligence and patience through such a lifestyle. In contrast, my sister was raised in a pampered environment, far removed from effort and hardship, and we felt that she needed an opportunity to rethink her lifestyle and attitude. The farm managed by our grandparents is located in a harsh environment far from the comforts of the city. There, daily life involves physical labor such as working in the fields from early morning and tending to livestock, with hard work at the center of life. Moreover, farm life is known as an ideal place to learn diligence, discipline, and responsibility. For my sister, living in such an environment would be a stark contrast to her indulgent past and would pose a significant challenge. It is an appropriate opportunity to teach her that effort is necessary to achieve anything, and that true joy lies beyond hard work. My father strongly believed that this experience would fundamentally change my sister's spoiled behavior. When she learned that our grandparents were coming to pick her up, my sister couldn't bear it and broke down in tears. "I don't want to live with my grandparents," she pleaded repeatedly, desperately apologizing as if regretting her past behavior. Witnessing this, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Seeing my sister face the consequences of her actions and reflect in tears for the first time made me feel that she was finally showing some signs of growth. It was a moment that slightly alleviated the anger and dissatisfaction I had harbored until then. However, seeing my sister desperately apologizing while crying, I couldn't help but feel sympathy somewhere in my heart. No matter how much she had been selfish and troubled the family, I couldn't bring myself to dislike my sister. Perhaps this is the mysterious strength of familial bonds. Seeing my sister's pained expression made me think that how she faces her own difficulties will be key to her future. I quietly pondered how much she would change through this experience and how we should watch over her as a family. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel that this was an excellent opportunity for her to fundamentally revise her privileged past lifestyle filled with indulgence. Through this opportunity, I strongly felt that my sister needed to understand how her actions had affected those around her and to face the realities of life. Living on our grandparents' farm, a place of labor and responsibility, is an unavoidable challenge for her, but also a chance to make a new start. Of course, it won't be an easy journey. In an environment that is the complete opposite of her carefully protected past life, how she will change remains unknown. However, I am convinced that this is the experience she needs, and if she embraces it, it will lead to her own growth. My sister, initially constantly complaining as she worked in the fields from early morning, has gradually begun to confront herself under the stern yet loving guidance of our grandparents. It's hard to imagine her being muddy while harvesting vegetables, a sight far from the sister I knew. I hope she comes to understand the importance of controlling her emotions and the value of earning her own money. While I can't yet say that my sister has completely reformed, it's clear that a sense of responsibility for her actions is beginning to take root. On the other hand, my parents have also reflected on their past behavior and apologized to me. However, recalling their previous attitude, I couldn't decide to forgive everything. I accepted their apologies but chose to keep some distance, seeing them honestly admit. We also had many things to reflect on, has gradually made the atmosphere at home more harmonious. As everyone in the family tried to change, the conflicts of the past have entirely receded into the background. Above all, I am truly relieved that the entire family has reaffirmed our bonds and can envision a future where we support each other more strongly than before.